Hello, welcome everyone. It's Paul at the Garland County Library, and I'm here this evening with Sonny Kay, who's the executive director of our local nonprofit, Low Key Arts. And Low Key, of course, has been involved in producing a lot of events and festivals over the years that give the spotlight to music, film, arts, and a lot more here in Hot Springs. And Sonny, if you want to promote anything you guys have coming up here in the future, you're certainly welcome to.
Well, thank you.
But the main reason Sonny is here tonight is to act as a guest moderator once again, since he's done such a great job of that in the past. He's going to be having a conversation with Duke Haney, who has had a fascinating career in a lot of different arts. He's an actor, a screenwriter, a novelist, and he's worked on the screenplay for the film Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. And Duke also has a book, which is a collection of essays called Death Valley Superstars, Occasionally Fatal Adventures in Filmland. And I haven't had a chance personally to check it out myself yet, but I noticed it gets a lot of good user reviews on various websites. And so if you like what you hear or see tonight, be sure to add it to your list. All right, so if anyone watching live has any questions or comments for Duke Haney during the broadcast, please post them there and I'll read them off at the end. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to these two and see you in a little bit.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Duke, welcome to Hot Springs, so to speak.
Thank you, Sonny.
Have you here?
I've always wanted to
go. First time, I guess. Well, Duke, you're here to talk about your most recent book, as Paul just mentioned. But before we jump into that, I'd like to cover a little bit of background information on you and your life and what got you interested in film in the first place, and how you came to be in the hot seat this afternoon.
I'm in the hot seat because I know you.
Where did we meet in Los Angeles? Like I was wrapping my brain. Yeah. But we have a lot of mutual friends from Colorado for some reason.
Yeah, I know, it's really weird, isn't it? Fort Collins is one of those places. Detroit is another. I have a lot of friends from Michigan, the Detroit area, for some odd reason, and then a lot of friends from Fort Collins, and that all begins with our mutual friend Burke. So I met you through Burke, and I know Eli, who I know is a good friend of yours, through Burke, and this is when I was hanging around the music scene
in Los Angeles, of course.
Yeah, and I'm originally from Virginia. I'm from a farming family. My maternal grandparents had a dairy farm, and my dad had a beef cattle farm, Angus beef.
Okay.
My parents divorced when I was young, and I lived in Charlottesville, but spent a lot of time on my grandparents' farm and my dad's farm as a kid. And I was always, very arty. I drew, very realistically from a young age, and so I was a little bit, weird. And as I moved into adolescence, I felt increasingly sort of alienated from, my peers, from my family, and I just started going to see a lot of movies. I think a lot of movie fans and cinephiles begin, in America anyway, as horror fans, and that's how I started. I was into all the classic horror stuff, and then it just some people remain arrested at that stage, but I'm one of those who kind of developed out of it, and just would see any movie that I could see practically, and then many that I wasn't supposed to see.
How funny.
Everything began with that, really.
And eventually you left Virginia, made your way first to DC and then to New York to eventually make your way into the film industry. Were you encouraged by your family to do that?
I wouldn't say that I was encouraged, but I think my parents knew that I was I was willful, and they weren't going to stand in my way. My mom vaguely had as a teenager ambitions of that kind herself. She said that, you know, she and a girlfriend were going to move to New York and starve as models or something like that. So there was a little bit of, I think, you know, wish fulfillment on her part that I was fulfilling. You know, I was very young when I left home. She remarried actually and moved to New Jersey, about an hour south of New York by train. So I could see her, you know, relatively often.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. You know, my dad helped me out a little bit here and there when funds were low, not a whole lot. And he's been, you know, very quick to remind me over the years as to, you know, when he did help me out. But, you know, I really had a moment of success very soon after I arrived. I was cast in a Canadian low-budget feature. That's actually one of the movies that I hear about most frequently these days for some strange reason. You know, when people reach out to me and they say, "Hey, you were in Siege, aka Self-Defense." But I had absolutely no idea what I was doing when I did that movie.
How old would you have been? 17 or 18?
I was 18.
Okay.
And the directors were a couple, a romantic couple. And they came to New York hoping to hire Mickey Rourke, and they somehow ended up with me. They went to Mickey Rourke's agent, who was a guy named David Gus, I remember. He also handled Ellen Barkin. And actually, he kind of liked them, David Gus. He couldn't give them Mickey Rourke, but he said, "Well, I'll send you some of my other people." And remarkably, I beat out everybody on David Gus's roster.
Incredible.
To get this part. So I went off and did that. And I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and then I didn't work. You know, I wasn't paid to work again for a very long time.
Wow.
And
okay.
So
you okay? Is it safe to say that your first love in film was acting?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so you spent the next, I think, roughly maybe a decade or so in New York. Is that right?
No, I was in New York. It's a little. I don't really remember how long. I think about 6 years or so, 7 years, because the thing was, I went back and forth for a while. I tried to be, you know, bi-coastal, as people used to say.
Right.
Wasn't working. So I had to let go of my apartment there, to my eternal regret. But I really liked LA a lot in the early days. You know, New York kind of felt like it was sort of over. The sort of very corporate mentality, you know, was taking over more, and it seemed like all the artists were being pushed more to the margins, you know, even more than they had been, you know, already.
Right.
And LA was, you know, much more affordable, and it was, you know, I moved because it was immediately clear to me that, you know, that I could work consistently in LA. I mean, I went out there for a job for Roger Corman, and I mean, within only about a week, Roger was saying, "I'd like you to direct something else for me." And then I got the Friday the 13th thing, and I didn't really, you know, want to be a screenwriter. But
so let me make sure I understand this correctly. You went out to LA to audition for an acting part, but
I got hired on the phone. I was actually, to be quite honest with you, I was coming down from an acid trip. I'd been out at nightclubbing on acid.
Okay.
I came home. It was, I did that on the night before Easter, and I came home and I crashed, and I woke up and I was still coming down. And I got this phone call from a guy named Joseph Minion, who had written After Hours for Martin Scorsese.
Okay.
Very famous movie. The first thing before I did that movie in Canada, the exploit that Siege, I had done Joe's student film at NYU, a student film for him. That was the very first time I did in film. And so he had gone out to LA to direct a movie for Roger. He was hired over the phone in New York. There was no script for it. he knew Roger's assistant, and she was like, "Hey, Joe, do you want to hop on a plane and come out here and do something for Roger?" And he was like, "Okay." And as they say, there was no script for it. He was told he could hire anybody he wanted to be in it. So he called me up. I said, "Hey, do you want to hop on a plane and come to LA and star in a Roger Corman movie?" And actually, I had to borrow money from my mom to, to get the ticket.
Right.
I was out there in 2 days, and the car broke down on the freeway. I got off the plane. There was a production assistant meeting me at LAX, and then the car breaks down on the freeway. I'm pushing it off the freeway. Baptism by fire.
Yeah.
They took me straight to a big costume, warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
There were all these costumes that went back to the 20s or something. I mean, everything they took off the rack, it was like, oh, Broderick Crawford wore this, or there was some story about every single thing. I mean, I actually wore a shirt in that movie that was worn by Treat Williams in the J. Edgar Hoover story.
That's amazing. How funny. Wow.
I think it was tailored for him.
Wow.
I was much skinnier than Treat Williams. So, there was this girl kind of, very suntanned girl kind of throwing all these, shirts and putting me in suits. And then I was taken in to meet Roger.
Wow.
And then he said, well, I'll let you guys go off and discuss the script. And so I went to a Mexican restaurant with Joe, and somebody else had been hired to help Joe with the script, but I basically elbowed that guy out of the way, within a couple of hours, because I was determined that this was going to be, my big break. And
was this? Pardon me for interrupting, dude. Was this what project was this? This was Daddy's Boys, is that right?
That's what it ended up being called. Yeah.
Okay.
We had a joke for it, which was "Be My Mama," and then it somehow got turned to Daddy's Boys. So it sort of sounds like gay porn, but and I had a lot of say in the casting. I was just talking about that yesterday. There was a guy named Dan Shore who had been in John Huston's Wise Blood, an adaptation of the Flannery O'Connor novel, and I brought Dan in. I'd never met him, but I just said, I love that guy. We got him in, and he did the part. I'm trying to think of somebody, for God's sake. Who is the name of the very strange guy that it'll come to me in a minute. But we had some really big people come in to read and meet with us, and Raymond J. Barry, who's a very well-known character actor. He, like, right after that movie, he played Tom Cruise's father in Born on the 4th of July.
Oh, okay.
So playing my dad to playing Tom Cruise's dad. So I used to play
the family resemblance.
Yeah, exactly. There is no family resemblance. Tom Cruise would be very happy to know. And he's the Scientologist of the family.
Right. So, I take it Roger must have had a dozen projects going simultaneously at any given time.
Not a dozen, but he always had things going. I mean, he would find some cheap place in the world to shoot. Like for a while it would be Argentina, and he would say, "I want a script for Argentina."
So how did you transition to becoming a screenwriter for him from being the lead in this first project?
Well,
and
originally
the writer, right? So you were writing and acting in that first one.
Yeah, they had hired a guy to collaborate with Joe, and I got him fired. Basically, is what happened. I didn't mean to get him fired. I mean, he and I just didn't, get on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was clear that, Joe and I were firing off each other far more than this guy. This guy just barely. I ripped my. That's what I get for being so demonstrative. I ripped my headphone off.
Modern problems.
Joe and I were just, we knew each other, and we were just going, back and forth, and coming up with ideas. So, the next day, it was really clear to the people at Roger's office that this other guy, was unnecessary, and he was given a little bit of money and sent on his way.
Right.
So I ended up I ended up taking over the entire script, which was not my intention. I wanted to have a hand in shaping the script. I wanted to have, I wanted to co-write it with Joe, and I did initially, but their styles didn't really mesh, and so somebody had to do it. And Joe was really super busy. I mean, we started shooting 2 days after I arrived, so we wrote just enough scenes to shoot that first day, and then we had 2 weeks off in which to sort of do the rest of it. Okay. And at a certain point, I just took over completely. I didn't even want a credit for it because I was afraid that people would want to hire me as a writer and not as an actor.
Right. That's something that I think you discussed in the book a little bit, is that conflict within yourself, and you even sort of altered your name a little bit for your first book, Band for Life.
Yeah, I did do that. Yeah.
I wonder. I don't know. Having a couple of having some decades under your belt now, and with that regard, like, does it matter as much? Is the name thing is it a source of divisiveness for you, or people? I mean, I guess people know who you are regardless of really what you're calling yourself at this point, right?
Well, I mean, nobody really knows who I am. I had a moment of fame as an actor in a faraway country briefly, and
that was in Belgrade, am I right?
That was in the former Yugoslavia.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
it was quite a weird experience. I mean, I felt like I got a real crash course in fame. And I mean, it was crazy. But that was a period when Serbia was ostracized from the rest of the world, and so it was very unusual to have Americans come, and I was doing a movie with a lot of local celebrities. I mean, they were all very famous there, and so we were going around the country, kind of opening the movie in this city and that city, and so there were mob scenes, and I mean, I felt briefly like one of the Beatles on A Hard Day's Night. I mean, I remember that there was a theater where they were showing the film, and I didn't want to see the film again. But every time I went outside, like, people would come rushing up to me. And
how
so
interesting.
I couldn't be alone. And so I went back in and I sat like in the manager's office and watched her and somebody else like count the ticket receipts. And I thought, wow, this is like a scene in some movie about the loneliness of fame or something.
Right. Are you tempted to go back ever, just to boost your ego a little bit?
I guess so. I don't really think about it anymore because I don't think it's likely to happen. I don't want to taunt myself with the impossible.
Sure.
I mean, it's a little bit of an ego rush. I remember, I moved back there to work on my first book, and I remember I was standing outside a movie theater one night, and I saw these people kind of huddled near me, and they were kind of looking over, like, somebody else would turn and look, and I thought, oh, they recognized me, and so I was kind of walking by like I didn't know, and it was kind of that kind of thing is kind of fun.
Sure.
But then, there are weird things that happen. I mean, people just come up to you and they're incredibly rude. I mean, I'm just saying what, people far more famous than me can tell you. I mean, they just come up and just say the absolute worst things and just act like they know you, start conversations with you about stuff that, I mean, I remember being at a party and everybody else there was Serbian, and some guy just came up to me and just started talking to me right away in English, and asked me about some movie on my resume. I mean, it was just like, going from 0 to, 50 or something like that. And I was like, hi, I'm Duke. So I don't know. I think fame is rather stupid, really. But it's helpful. It can be very helpful. I mean, it opens doors, and I wish that I had some notoriety as a writer, because certainly that would open doors for me, and I could do more events like this one.
Great. So Death Valley Superstar is your third book, and your first on this topic. on this topic of kind of a Hollywood kind of, I guess you could call it noirish, in the sense that it's sort of focused on crime and a sort of underside to reality for a lot of people. Some of the people in the book are household names and very well known, very well documented, although you managed to unearth facts about them that are, I think, seeing in many cases the light of day for the first time, which is commendable. But there's a lot of people in the book who I'd never heard of before as well. And I was wondering kind of what your process was to decide who made the cut. And I realized that these are essays written over the period of, I'm not sure, maybe 7 to 10 years or so.
A long period of time. I mean, there were some that I wrote before there was a book, where there was going to be a book. And so when the book was proposed to me, the publisher of my second book kept sort of saying, "I'd like you to do a whole book about movies in LA, because I think those are your best topics." And I was like, no, because I wanted to write another novel. And then eventually I wrote, there's a piece in there about the son of Errol Flynn, Sean Flynn. And that was a kind of a new direction for me. It was very hard to do, but it was satisfying. Even though I was attacked online by a bunch of Errol Flynn freaks who were really,
oh, really?
Yeah, it's really the strangest thing. I mean, who knew?
For damaging his legacy or something?
Well, it's a whole thing involved. You know, he was tried for statutory rape, and I guess they want to believe that, you know, that he was charged unjustly. You know, the evidence just simply doesn't point in that direction. I mean, you know, he was with these underage girls, and you know, that has nothing to do with whether the DA was corrupt or anything. I mean, those are two different matters. So they were really furious with me, these people. But that was the only negative thing about it. I mean, they sort of launched this. They got other people to kind of come in and pile on, and, you know, and tell me how horrible I was and all this stuff. But you know, it passed quickly, and overall, I was really, you know, I was pleased with the outcome of writing itself. And so I went back to that publisher and I said, okay, I'll do a whole thing like this. And I began to see that I could use this essay and that one and this one, you know, things that I'd already done. And then from there, there were certain people that had always interested me, obscure people, whose stories it seemed to me I could do something with. And then there were things that just sort of came up along the way. I mean, for example, I just came upon this early photograph of Jim Morrison from 1964, before he was Jim Morrison, you know, and I put it on Facebook, and just like, oh, hell, you know, look, it's Jim Morrison. And it got such a reaction. I wasn't accustomed to getting any reaction on social media much. And so I thought, oh, people must really like Jim Morrison. I should figure out a way to write about him. And the only way I could figure out to write about, you know, him in an original way was to hire a psychic medium and go to the location of his, you know, his former residence, this West Hollywood, and see if we could contact him on the other side.
This is one of my favorite chapters in the book. I think it's just a great. I mean, not only is it interesting topic and sort of the quintessential LA band, if you will, the Doors, but just the whole process of trying to find someone to conduct this seance in a town that you would think would be full of candidates, actually isn't, and it was. It's very amusing. I mean, I love the whole book, but that chapter in particular really resonated with me.
Thank you.
I think so the another chapter in the book that really surprised me, actually, and it was a nice surprise, was turning the page and finding the article about the chapter about Lee Harvey Oswald. Someone I wasn't necessarily expecting to find in the book.
Yeah.
But who it turns out certainly. I mean, you discuss Oswald and his whole persona and the influence of film on his behavior over the course of a number of years. And I'll be honest with you, as somebody who's a bit of a armchair assassin-ophile, there's a number of points that you make regarding this that I had actually never seen in print before. I've never seen anybody frame the discussion of Oswald that way. I wonder if you'd like to talk about that at all, or if there's anything else to about that?
No. Well, thank you for mentioning that that chapter. That's I'm fond of it. It doesn't get mentioned a lot. It is a weird one to have in the book. Well, what happened with that was I had always been, I had some interest in the case, and not an overwhelming interest, but I felt, he's an interesting character to me, figure to me. I had read Norma Mailer had written this massive book about him. And I had read that with interest, and I'd always sort of thought, vaguely that I'd like to write something about him, but I never really thought I would have the opportunity. And the 50th anniversary of the assassination was coming up, and actually for the Jim Morrison piece, I read his poetry collection, Lords and the New Creatures. And the first part of it, it's weird. It's thought of as being a book about a book of poetry, but it's much stranger than that. I mean, the second half is poetry, but the first half it's almost like this sort of essay about film. It's sort of broken up into fragments, and he writes about Oswald there. He felt it very significant that Oswald had been arrested in a movie theater, cinema. And so that played into, all these ruminations on cinema. He was a film student. That's how I began.
Right. Sure.
He went to school with Francis Ford Coppola.
That's right.
And with a pornographer named Bob Chen, with whom I had an exchange.
Funny, really. He's say that again. I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
He's the guy who discovered John Holmes.
Oh, okay.
Bob Chen.
Wow.
I'm researching something else, and I tracked him down with great difficulty to ask him some questions about a movie that it was not a pornographic movie; it was something else. And so we went back and forth a few times, and so those were Morrison's classmates. And so anyway, I thought, that's a really interesting take on Oswald, to kind of think about him in cinematic terms. And so I began to look into that. I thought, if I can find a way to write about him in that way, I could include him in the book. So, I came up with enough stuff there to kind of, I began to just look through stuff for references to movies, in books about him. And it turned out that, he was rather an avid moviegoer.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
For the sake of discussion and leaving no stone unturned, and I mean, your book is so full of facts and weird coincidental links to things that I can't help but mention this. Now, you start off this discussion with the famous Bob Jackson photo of Oswald being killed by Jack Ruby, and right. I wonder if you had ever heard the anecdotal story that the famous English DJ John Peel was present in the garage when that happened.
Oh, I did not know that. Wow.
Isn't that wild?
God, that blow. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, you can consider.
I thought you might get a kick out of that. That really that sent shivers down my spine when I read that. That was Peele's autobiography begins by talking about Oswald being assassinated and how he was in Dallas on a work study thing from England and was working for some radio station, and they sent him there to cover. They were transferring Oswald or something, I think, ostensibly, right before that happened. And so yeah, he was there, and it's just that for me was such a bizarre, just kind of like what do you even call that? It's just a weird, like when you know, for me personally, like two of my most avid interests sort of cross paths, which is sort of like conspiratorial thinking and English rock and roll. Two great tastes.
Crazy. That's crazy. Well, you know, I mean, there's sort of an occult link there, you know, between the JFK assassination and English rock and roll, because I always think of the JFK assassination as I guess tails on the coin that flipped a few months later with the Beatles on the other side of it. I think it was those two events happening a few months with each other that kind of just completely changed the world as we know it. I think certainly in America and the UK.
Not to harp on the Oswald thing, but there's one more point that I think is so interesting that you made. It's not really a point; it's a fact that you point out that I had never heard before, in all my you know, decades of casually being interested in this. Apparently, that rifle that he is meant to have used to allegedly shoot from the Texas School Book Depository was linked to another shooting a month or so before. An attempted assassination attempt on a former general in Dallas.
Edwin Walker. Yeah. And
that's something that I honestly, if I've ever, I don't remember ever hearing anything about that, let alone reading anything about it. And let alone knowing that there is a tangible link to the alleged murder weapon.
Yeah.
So that fact alone frames Oswald as a person in a much different context than virtually anything else that's ever been discussed about him. At least the pop stuff that's regurgitated over and over and over again. Right?
Well, that's usually left out. It's usually left out. I think it's largely left out because I think that conspiratorialists, and I don't want to get into, you know, a thing. You know, if you're a conspiratorialist, I mean, that's, you know, perfectly fine. I began this one. I bit by bit concluded that more than likely, you know, I don't say definitively, but more than likely Oswald was acting alone. But I think that people don't talk very much about that at all, because I think it hurts the case against Oswald.
It does.
Yeah,
it really does. Yeah,
being the lone assassin.
Yeah,
he took a shot. He nearly got him. You know, General Walker was a segregationist. I think he was associated, I think, with the John Birch Society. He had his own society called, I think it was called the National Indignation Association. It was some kind of bizarre thing. Like
amazing, incredible name.
And you know, he had organized a protest against Adlai Stevenson when Stevenson appeared in Dallas a month before JFK.
Right.
A woman in this crowd struck Adlai Stevenson over the head with a sign,
wow.
and people were spitting on him because they thought of him as a sort of communist, neo-communist, something like that. So the Dallas police were supposed to be on high alert because of this kind of right-wing, you know, rage.
I mean, there was a full-page ad printed in the newspaper, right, the morning of the assassination, warning him not to come to Dallas.
Right. Yeah. And there were those who booed him when he arrived at Love Field, you know. And they're, you know, if you look at the footage of that, I mean, the crowd is overwhelmingly pro JFK. I think even people who may disagree with his politics were floored by the Kennedy glamour. You know, he had Jackie with him. She was a secret weapon, secret campaign weapon. You know, they had just been to this big tragedy not long before. They had a child die, you know, baby die, and so this is the first I think she had traveled since that. And Patrick was, I think, the name of the baby. And anyway, but if you look into the, you know, if you look at the footage, I mean, I really reviewed the footage so many times I can't even tell you. You'll see signs there that are, you know, JFK go home or something. You know, I know somebody who was there at Left Field.
Do you really? Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
It's my John Peel. He was a teenager who was in the crowd. He skipped school that day to go to the airport to see JFK.
Wow, what a remarkable memory to have, or a thing in your life. I assume you've been to Dealey Plaza.
I have not. I've always wanted to go. I mean, in fact, if this pandemic ever lifts, I'd like to take a long road trip, and that would certainly be one of the places I'd like to go.
Yeah, we'll come through Arkansas first, and I'll catch a ride. We'll go down to Dallas together. So
all right, great. You got it.
Yeah, it's so peculiar to go there because it really hasn't changed at all. And if you're familiar with the, you know,
I have. Oh my God, I have just looked and looked and looked and looked, and I mean, I feel like I know every inch of it already. You know, but, yeah, but I know it's like frozen. It's very peculiar. It's in time, the whole thing. You know,
they've erected a monument to him there, but it doesn't really change the physical setup. And they've painted a white X in the road where the death shot struck, which I think is a little tasteless. But then again, they're going to have people asking forever, where did it happen? So I guess that, you know. Anyway, that's that was an element of the book I wasn't expecting, and it was for me it was a fascinating sort of detour through something else. But I wonder if there's anyone who you would like to have had in the book who didn't make it in this time. Who maybe probably quite a few, I guess, from your body language.
Not quite a few, but there were two essays that I researched, you know, somewhat extensively. They're both. One of them is very obscure, and I ultimately abandoned it because that essay because I didn't think it was the kind of piece that really needed an investigative journalist. And it turns out that I have real skills at that, which I didn't realize I had. But it really needed the cooperation of authorities and people in the victim's family and so on. And it didn't look like I would ever get it. And so the other one was about a very famous among surfers surfer. Dora. He's had a couple of books written about him. I had a whole thing I wanted to do. I wanted to write about him from a very specific point of view because, you know, one of the biographies of Mickey Dora is so exhaustive that there really isn't much to add to it. But I had a whole way I wanted to tie him into LA history and Malibu and all that. But the thing that happened last year was I discovered somebody else. It's an extraordinary story, and there's actually an Arkansas link to it. This person spent time in Fayetteville. Again, he was an actor, very obscure, who was killed in a plane crash in 1973 and buried in Potter's Field in a very small town in Texas. It's just a mind-blowing story. And I've been I spent months. This is how I learned that I have skills as an investigative journalist. I was just cold calling people and tracking down numbers, and that's how I spent most of the pandemic, was trying to track down the story. I initially thought maybe I would turn it into a long essay. I would expand Death Valley Superstars and put that in there, and maybe write the other two things. but I don't know what it will become at this point. It's quite something. But that guy for me, I mean, this is the ultimate. If there's any such thing as a Death Valley superstar, which is a term that I borrowed from a film made about one of the subjects that's obviously already in the book.
Mm-hmm.
This guy would be the ultimate Death Valley superstar for me.
Okay. Wow.
It's like discovering a band that like nobody else.
Right.
My band.
With a story that involves a
band.
a plane crash at the end. I mean, that's going to be.
He was smuggling. He was drug smuggling.
Oh wow. Okay.
And he was a Green Beret in Vietnam during the Tet Offensive.
Good God.
He was a rock and roll singer. It's crazy. I mean, how much I managed to compact into 29 years.
Incredible.
Crazy story. I would love to maybe do it as a book, but I just don't know. Because he's so obscure. I don't know that anybody would I don't know. I could persuade anybody to read the book, and he was so mysterious. It's so difficult to. There's areas of his life that remain, very difficult. I can't penetrate them, and so I don't know that I would have enough material, for a whole. But we'll see.
Well, yeah. I hope your research on the topic is to see the light of day sometime. That sounds fascinating.
Thank you. He's watching me right now. Somebody gave me a poster of one of his movies.
Okay. Really?
This project called The Law.
I thought you were being.
Yeah, my friend. I put this poster up. I'm facing it right now, and now I have him to stare at me all the time. You better do my story.
There's so many things there's so much I'd love to talk to you about to do with just LA itself, because I know that you are an Anglophile, I guess, if you could kind of redefine the word. You've been there, what, 3.5 decades now? And I mean, it's a place.
Yeah, it's been a long damn time. It's not quite that long, but it's 30 years. Yeah. Thank you for helping to reveal how.
Well, I wonder. I mean, something's keeping you there. Clearly, I know from my own experience, it's a place that you can love passionately and still find contempt in your heart for it, or just be really just need a break every now and then. I wonder what about it is still appealing to you, and how it's changed in the decades that you've been there.
Oh God, I don't know. I don't know. I've been up and down and backward and forward with it. I didn't like it the first time I visited. I visited very briefly before, really briefly before moving to New York, and I hated it. And then I flew out here to do that movie, and I really kind of fell in love with it then. And then I went back to New York, and it was like awakening from a dream. I was like, what am I? This is where I belong, and it's true that I had much more of a New York sensibility. There's just no question about that. But that sensibility doesn't really exist now. New York has changed much more dramatically, I think, than has LA. New York has become a little bit more like LA. So many trends begin here, have begun here for a very long time. In California, anyway. I don't know. I hated it again, and I left it, and I moved to Yugoslavia, and then I had to come back. There were various reasons I had to, commitments I had, and I don't know. Then there was that period when I met you. I mean, I was really in love, madly in love with music, and I just was movies had just become kind of a day job to me. As long as I could just go out and see bands, I really wanted to start a band. But
Do you play an instrument?
I taught myself to play guitar.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
I haven't played now in so long that I would be like, you know, be like 1 + 1 = 2 or something. You know what I mean? It's like, be like kindergarten again, you know. But, no, I love the electric guitar, and no, it was just that was a great period, and I got to like LA because you know, pretty much everybody has to come here, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And so you see everybody. I mean, I didn't care about all the, you know, huge acts. I mean, nothing would, you know, scare me more than being, you know, stuck in traffic at the Staples Center or something like that. You know,
Sure. Yeah.
You know, like that tall, you know, like something went down on the stage. But no, I loved, you know, being right up there. You know, I like being next to the stage, and you just see everything, and you know, it's just I don't know, you feed off each other, and very exciting. You know, I mean, you know that, and I mean, not always. I mean, you know, there are a lot of bands you hear half a song and you're like, bye.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
This isn't something I plan on asking you about, but do you notice a fundamental difference between actors and musicians in Los Angeles?
Oh yeah, I mean, it started to change because I mean, this is so funny, but I started to know like these pretty actress girls, you know, aspiring actress girls who were in bands, you know, which I mean, which just would have been inconceivable at one time. I mean, you know, like, I mean, those particular types of bands, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, our mutual friend Pete, I don't know if you remember this girl, Kelly, this blonde girl, they were in God's Gang together. But anyway, I mean, somebody like that. I mean, Kelly was just, you know, wanted to be like, I don't know, I guess she worked in commercials, Pete did. I don't know, but I would never imagine a girl like that, you know, being in a noise band, you know, but I began to see that kind of coming into the scene, you know, a little bit. I mean, I remember going to the Silver Lake Lounge one night, and there was Kiefer Sutherland sitting at the bar. I was like, what the hell are you doing here? And there was a guy who was on Entourage. I can't think of his name now, but I remember seeing him in a show. And you know, every once in a while, I would see celebrities at shows. You know?
Well, that's LA. You see him everywhere. You see him, you know, see him at the bank. See him, See him
much more in New York, though. Much more. Because in LA, you know, there's not as much street life, but in New York, you walk down the street, like, oh, who was? Oh, I don't know.
Literally, the very first time I went to New York, I got out of the van and Willem Dafoe was on the payphone. That's true. I think, LA just has that. I mean, I guess they both do that sort of unpredictable, you know, just the sort of surrealism of just walking into a place and seeing something, you know, potentially literally walking into somebody who's as familiar to you as anyone in your family who you've never met before. Because you've seen them on TV for 20 years or something like that. You know?
Yeah, there's always that weird moment when the image that you have kind of blends with the person in front of you, because people never look exactly like you think they're going to look.
Yeah, and they're never doing what you expect them to be doing. Right? I remember seeing Burt Reynolds at a Studio City once picking out Frank Kozik posters. Right? I mean, you just think to yourself, like, how does Burt Reynolds even know who Frank Kozik is? And let alone, like, where to get a poster? And there he was, like, loading up on expensive rock and roll memorabilia, right? That's the last thing in the world I thought.
I wonder what happened to that stuff.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Well, I'm thinking about that more and more as I you know, get closer to the end, I guess. I'm like, what's going to happen to all my stuff? You know, it's just going to get thrown out. You know, I actually there's a woman who lives next door to me. She must have died. Like, I mean, maybe she's been mummified in there for like the last 15 years or something. But I mean, the house was empty. And then suddenly the lights came on and there was this dumpster outside, and people were, I guess the children were throwing all the stuff out. And I actually went in and rescued some of the books.
Wow.
They were throwing out Faulkner. You don't throw out Faulkner.
I feel like Hollywood seems littered with, I mean, just from my time living there, I remember a handful of homes just in my neighborhood that seemed as though they were abandoned, right there in the heart of Hollywood, just no human activity whatsoever. And you just get this, it's easy to imagine these houses being full of incredible stuff from another era, and for whatever reason, or maybe there's some eccentric person living inside who just never comes out. But there's quite a lot of places like that around, that they're not in disrepair, they're not being squatted or anything like that, and you just feel like, I don't know if it's just an LA thing or what. I mean, LA clearly attracts eccentric people. Many of them, just the kind of people you discuss in your book, who you bump into on a bus ride, right? I imagine some of them have wonderful, incredible collections of stuff, like the kind of stuff that you're talking about. And yeah, I don't know.
There are a lot of, I don't know. I mean, I think the younger generation, I'm not sure that they're into collecting so much.
Maybe not. Maybe that's just. Yeah.
But certainly LA, it used to attract a lot of truly eccentric sort of film nerds, and they were big collectors of stuff. Probably
like the guy you're talking about who owned the video store on Vermont or wherever that was. I remember that place. It was kind of near the Amok bookshop, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Amok was over on Vermont, and Jerry's video store was on
Hillhurst.
On Hillhurst, and I think Amok was near that other video store called Mondo Video, which was
you're absolutely right. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Like a rival of Jerry's place, but Mondo Video, and I mean, I'm kind of hard to freak out, but Mondo Video really freaked me out. Yeah. I mean, I went in there because they had a lot of stuff, punk rock stuff, that I could only access through them. Stuff that I wanted to see. I mean, stuff that now that this is 20 years ago, but stuff that now would be on YouTube, like that, that famous public access flipper show on TV. Like, they had like a video of that. Like Jerry didn't have that. Jerry had a lot of strange stuff, but not that much kind of music stuff. And Mondo had more of it. And I mean, they just had stuff on the walls and just artifacts in there, and they were just it was kind of like, they reminded me of like the Texas Chainsaw Family or something, like hee, and I'd be like, just stare, I'm gonna go over here before they say anything too weird to me, and I wasn't always successful, but Jerry's place, I mean, you talk about, I mean, there were the weird celebrities I would see in there all the time. I would see people in there,
Wow.
But
speaking of weird celebrities, I know that Michael Jackson would frequent Cinephile in Santa Monica.
Oh, I heard that.
But he would. My friend who was a clerk there told me that he would go in by himself, without not even accompanied. And this was as recently as the early 2000s, I think. He would go to Cinephile with a Halloween mask that he would be holding over his face, which is just an incredible thing to think about. That actually once,
Well, in that sense, if in no other, I guess I can feel sorry for Michael Jackson.
Yeah,
because that kind of, as I said, about fame. I mean, it's very isolating.
Yeah.
So useful, really, again, only for opening doors. I remember there was a story really quickly about Kurt Cobain. He was there was a girl who had known him for years, and he had just done some big show, and she went backstage to see him, and he was nodding off. I don't know if it was from heroin or what. And every time he would nod off, he kept kind of coming in and out of consciousness. These handlers around him would go, "You, get out of here! Go, go, go!" And they try to get this girl out of the room. And he would come. His eyes would up. He'd go, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Don't do that. She's my friend." And they back off. Nod off. You're like, "Get out of here! Go, go!" And so that was, her. She told that story by way of relating, basically, how the loneliness of fame.
Yeah.
There are these people who they make it their job to get between you and your friends and people that you care about, and then of course other of your friends, instantly want to start using you. to get the, you know, because you're powerful.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's an anecdote that goes with that. But,
well, I was tempted to bait you into some philosophizing on the state of the film industry, because I value your opinion on that very, very much, and you're very eloquent in your disdain for well, frankly, so many things, but I think that's all really valid. However, I would encourage people to get and read your book before doing that. And I know that Paul mentioned that there was a lot of questions submitted ahead of time for our discussion tonight, and I don't want to totally monopolize what we're talking about here. So I'd like to invite Paul to come back on. And there he is. Maybe we can pitch Duke some of what was submitted.
That was a wild conversation, but
was it?
But appreciate it. All right. So we had someone named Kalisha submit some questions in advance regarding the film industry, and a few questions were, what are the other films other than Friday the 13th that inspired you, Duke?
Oh, I wasn't inspired even remotely by Friday the 13th. I mean, I hadn't even seen one of those movies when I was invited to pitch ideas for the sequel to that. It's rather embarrassing to me that this is that's the film that will be engraved on my tombstone. You know, it could be worse. You know, the films that inspired me. Well, films. I'm thinking maybe the question has to do with films that led me to get there, as opposed to films that might inspire me now. A film that recent film that I can cite, now would be the film made by Chloe Zhao before Nomadland. I haven't seen Nomadland, but there was a film writer she did, which I absolutely love. I just think it's just a gorgeous movie. One of the films that there are many films I loved as a teenager that led me to becoming interested in film and in becoming an actor. Would have been Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven. Was just a film that just I must have seen that film. I mean, I just kept going back and back and back and back every night that it played in my hometown, and I even took a bus to DC to see it when it left my hometown. I mean, I was just in that film. So it's with Richard Gere and Sam Shepard, Brooke Adams. Later on, I did a movie with Brooke Adams. By the way, I played a cop in a terrible horror movie that she and I did together. And I asked her very nervously about Days of Heaven, and I think I barely even heard what she said. I was like so nervous because I was actually working with this woman I'd seen in this movie, so many times. So sorry, that's a long answer. I'm so sorry.
You're fine. Could be films or literature. What sort of stories excite you?
Well, there's different ways to answer the question. One would be the kind of stories that excite me to write, and then there are the kind of stories that excite me to read. The kind of stories I write, generally everything I write seems somehow to do with with being a performer, with the performing arts one way or another. Because I was one for so long, and I feel temperamentally that that's what I remain. But psychologically, I think I'm much more like a writer. And so I'm very interested sort of just in people who have been, a part of the movie industry, somehow, or had been in bands, things like that. I'm really a very eclectic reader. I mean, I read a lot of nonfiction these days because a lot of my reading is unfortunately for research. I would like to read more for pleasure. I just like things that are lively and fun, but not at the expense of substance. You know, I think it's very important to have a sense of fun. I don't know if I've answered the question, but
I think so. Yeah.
Okay,
good answer. Here's what I think was her best question, and this is what Sonny had alluded to talking about there at the end. What should the film and/or TV industry be doing for writers that it isn't?
Run that by me again.
What should the film and TV industry be doing for writers that it isn't?
Everything. You know,
you're biased.
Well, you know, the first thing is that you know, if we're talking about real writers, there's an awful lot of people who want to write for film and television who aren't real writers. I mean, I remember I used to go to you know, a copy shop in Hollywood when I needed copies of scripts, and there would be all this trash, you know, like in these receptacles right next to it, and it would always, you know, I could see that these were, you know, pieces of screenplays, and I would pull it out of the trash just to see sort of what other people were coming in, and it belonged in the trash. I mean, it was like run-on sentences, people who did not know how to construct a sentence. It was just, you know, these are people who they're not writers. I don't really know why they want to do this, because they've never committed themselves to learning how to write. You have to be willing to apprentice yourself in that way. I don't think the answer is necessarily, you know, to get into a program. I think that the only way to really do it is just to see, specifically with screenwriting, is just to see a lot of movies, and really good movies, and to study the, you know, actually, if you see enough really good movies, you'll absorb the format of the writing. You know, I think. And then you just have to do it. You have to practice, and you have to be ruthless in your criticism of yourself. And you will reach a point. I don't know. I can't, you know, put a date on it. But you'll reach a point where you'll just know that you've arrived. That you know that you've honed something. But if we're talking about real writers, I think that the industry should trust them more, because the industry has always treated writers like children who can do nothing right. You know, it's like, no, and, you know, slap your hand. No, that's not how this is going to be. You're just going to be like this. You know, you go off and do what we tell you to do. And I think that writers should generally be valued. I don't think that they've ever been valued in Hollywood. They've always just been treated as, you know, there's that famous Hitchcock quote, "Actors are cattle," which
actors are what? I'm sorry.
Cattle. But what he meant was that you basically, the way that he directed, you know, what he meant was that, you know, that you know, he did not really work with actors in the sense of, like, you know, you get their input and you block the scene, you know, with their input. What he meant was that, you know, he already knew sort of where they were going to stand the shots, and he was just like, okay, you stand here and you say this line, then you sit over here and you pick this up, you know. And so he was just directing them like him, you know. And he just trusted that they were, you know, that they had the craft to say the lines, you know, decently. So he just, you know, just wanted them to sit there and be photographed. But I think that, truly, I think writers have always been treated like second and third class citizens in the film business. I mean, you never see, you know, a writer's name, you know, typically, you know, you know, like you know, you'd say a Robert Zemeckis film. I mean, you know, how many films did William Faulkner write? You saw a William Faulkner film. So writers have never been treated as the true authors of the film. The author of the film is the director. So anyway,
excellent.
Is that a bit of a rant?
people enjoy listening to rants. I think, or they wouldn't be listening. That comes with most podcasts and conversations online.
That's probably true.
You got a couple shout outs in the comments. Jason says, "Hey dudes," and Bryce says, "Duke," with lots of letters and exclamation.
Oh wow! Well, that's great. Is that Jason C?
Nope.
Nope.
Jason LG.
Jason LG. All right. Well, I'm gonna have to think about that one. All
right. Well, I'll give you guys an opportunity to.
Oh, you froze.
Sonny, you're mute.
Because I muted my mic to stop that feedback thing going on. The Jason with a middle initial L stands for Lee. If that rings any bells, just like
it does. Yeah. I'm so sorry.
You're in the hot seat. It's all right. It's easy to get forgettable.
All right, so I'll give you guys an opportunity to have any final remarks you'd like to share. Let's start with Duke.
I don't know. I don't know. I think that you got to kick me off here.
Well, if you don't mind, Paul, I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask you a question, Duke.
Sorry.
If you don't mind, I would love to know what's next for you. I mean, you're working on a new book? I hope.
Yes, as a matter of fact, right before we did this today, I got up and I was wrestling with this octopus last night until like 6 a.m, and I got up today and immediately began to wrestle the octopus again. But this is a novel called The X-Rated Book of the Dead, and
sounds intriguing.
I've been thinking about it. Thank you. I've been thinking about it for years, and then I had to finish Death Valley Superstars, so that I was it took me so long to recuperate from that
right.
I found it difficult to start it. So and then I have the other thing, the nonfiction story that
right.
I'm thinking about turning into a book. And if I do, my working title for that would be Tracing Skip.
Okay. Interesting.
Like Skip Traced. You got that right. Yeah.
I get it now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Went over so yeah, that's not to reboot the conversation here or anything, but that was an interesting point you just made. I'm curious, just as a something of a amateur writer myself, do you go through a period of just decompression after turning something into your publisher, where you don't write for a while or something of that nature?
Well, I guess it doesn't have to be that way. If I were more professional, I would just go right into something else. I wouldn't be so emotionally attached to it. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, there's just such investment. I mean, I do everything with such intensity. I'm afraid. I mean, it's really funny because when I was starting off as an actor, I was like, I got to be really intense, because I had really intense actors. And then it turned out that I never had to amp up the level of intensity. I mean, I was just naturally that way.
Right.
So I just pour everything into everything I write.
Mm-hmm.
So then it becomes very difficult for me to fully let go of it. I find myself really, concerned about the reaction from people. I shouldn't be concerned with the reaction, but I am. I saw yesterday that somebody had gone on to Amazon and given one of my books a 1-star rating, and I mean, it was like I've been shot. I don't know. I mean, I just don't think the level of rating warrants a 1-star rating. But I can only assume the content was offensive to this person. So.
I mean, yeah, that's just at that point. I can sympathize. I know that difficulty with having to reckon with things like that. But as someone who's read 2 of your 3 books, I beg to differ with the 1-star review. I think you're an exceptional writer, actually. So
thank you. I really appreciate that.
Where can people buy this book, Death Valley Superstars? Which is
oh yeah, that's the one. Yeah, all right. Yeah, the cover. That's I always love that photograph, and I just love that picture. The guy in the picture is not. There's nothing in him about the book, but it turned out that we could get the picture for like a modest sum, and I was like, go for it, So it was taken in Rome actually in 1958. He was attacking the paparazzi.
Okay, Anthony Steele.
Anthony Steele. He was married at the time to Anita Ekberg, who was sort of like the Swedish Marilyn Monroe. Really curvaceous woman. She's in the Trevi Fountain scene on the Dolce Vita, the film. And actually, there's a character in there that's based on Anthony Steele. They recreate in the film that thing of her movie husband attacks paparazzi.
And that's literally what's going on in this photo.
Right, exactly. So that photo was that incident was recreated in La Dolce Vita. Yeah, actually, the term paparazzi comes from La Dolce Vita. But so you can find the book anywhere, and it can be ordered through a bookstore. I mean, if anybody doesn't like the idea, I don't like the idea of ordering from Amazon because I would prefer to support my local booksellers.
Sure.
It's very easy to order it, special order it. It's not a book that's likely to be carried in most, already. It's not likely to just be you walk into a store and find it on the shelf because it's just not. It doesn't enjoy the reputation of something like Hollywood Babylon, which is a book to which it has unfortunately been compared. It's a much different book, much different book.
Yeah. Well, it's very dense and don't
say that. Oh, Sonny,
no, dense in the best way possible. I mean, chock full of fascinating anecdotal things, historical things, things to do with your career. I mean, it's as much about you and your career as it is any individual person or subject covered in the book. So it's a very clever intertwining of your own personal history with those of a lot of famous and I guess you could say kind of infamous characters. And I think it's, there's a wonderful quote that you have on the back of the book that says, slow read this book without distractions because writing and tales this exceptional must be savored. And I think that's actually I couldn't have said that better myself. I think really setting aside a little bit of time, distraction free to really absorb everything that went into this is a lot more rewarding than the tendency to just in our accelerated age to kind of speed read stuff. I find myself doing it, and I purposely put the brakes on reading your book, and I feel like I got so much more out of it because of that. So there's my advice.
Well, thank you. I really love the woman who wrote that blurb. She's just the greatest, sweetest, nicest lady. I've never met her in person. She lives in Louisiana. And that's something else I'd like to do on this.
Yeah, exactly. We got our itinerary is mapping itself out tonight.
Right.
So,
well, Paul, I'm just going to say once again that you remind me of Conrad Keeley and You Will Know Us by the Trail of Dead.
I know the band, but I can't recognize. I wouldn't recognize what they look like.
You don't really. It's just a hair. I mean, you don't really look that much like her. Right?
I'll look them up. We'll see. All right.
Well, Duke, it's been awesome, man. It's been great to talk to you and get into your head a little bit about this. I'm so grateful to you for spending an hour with us this evening, and really looking forward to the further fruits of your labors.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed getting to know you through your work, much more than I did in LA.
Well, I really appreciate. I really appreciate the opportunity. and you know, we have a mutual admiration society. You know, I love your label, and you know.
Well, thank you very much.
Particularly close to, you know, one of the bands on the label, as you know, one of whom just used a lot of exclamation points in greeting us or greeting me. I think that you were sort of also greeted there.
Yeah.
So I really, really appreciate, you know, being asked to do this.
Well, good. Thank you. I'm glad that that's the case, and I think your work deserves as much attention as anybody can help guide to it. So thank you. And thank you, Paul, and the library for allowing us to do this. And
thank you, Paul, in the library. Order a copy of my book.
Yes, order the book, Death Valley Superstars by Duke.
I'll send you one.
Yeah. All right. Well,
thank you guys for joining. I appreciate you, both of you, and Sonny. Thanks for always doing a great job.
My pleasure.
Being a guest moderator, it's nice not to have to do it myself.
Sure, my pleasure. Anytime. And Duke, I'm serious. This road trip to Dallas, New Orleans, and the Hot Springs. Let's make it real.
Oh, that'd be great. All right. Well, let's just hope that this pandemic ends soon. I'm getting my second shot next week, so
great.
I'm doing my part.
Yeah. Well, things are getting back to normal down here in a hurry, so
good.
We'll be ready for you.
All right.
Well, thanks everyone for watching, and have a good night, both
good
of
night.
you and all the audience.
Thanks.
Good night, everyone.